On the morning of Tuesday, September 11, 2001, America changed forever as 4 planes were hijacked and used as weapons against the United States. The first plane, American Airlines Flight 11, was hijacked by 5 men who took control of the cockpit and began flying the plane towards New York. The plane crashed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center at 8:46 a.m., leaving a massive hole through the building and an intense fire to burn down the tower. Then, at 9:03 a.m., another hijacked plane, United Airlines Flight 175, crashed into the South Tower of the World Trade Center. At around 9:59 a.m., the South Tower collapsed, and 23 minutes later, at 10:28, the North Tower collapsed. To this day, the area in which the Twin Towers stood is called Ground Zero, symbolizing the aftermath and impact of the terrorist attacks. As the country was in terror over the attacks of the Twin Towers, another plane, American Airlines Flight 77, was hijacked by a group of 5 men and directed towards Virginia. The plane crashed into the Pentagon in Arlington, Virginia at 9:43 a.m., leaving a 75-foot hole in the building's side. As the headquarters of the U.S. military was up in flames, 23,000 workers fled the Pentagon, overtaken with total fear and confusion. Then, United Airlines Flight 93 was hijacked by 4 terrorists whose target was believed to be the U.S. Capitol building or the White House. However, after hearing of the other 3 crashes, passengers on board the plane tried to regain control of the flight by fighting the hijackers, ultimately crashing into an empty field in rural southwestern Pennsylvania at 10:10 a.m. As the first massive attack against the United States since Pearl Harbor, having a greater death toll than that of the Pearl Harbor attack, the 9/11 attacks left a massive impact on America. As officials evaluated the damage, they found that fatalities included around 3,000 people in the Twin Towers, 266 crew members and passengers aboard the 4 hijacked planes, and 190 workers in the Pentagon. In addition, over 2,100 people were injured, requiring medical attention, and over 400,000 witnesses and survivors were later diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder as a result of the attacks. Shortly after the second plane crashed into the South Tower, the FAA shut down all flights across the United States, canceling all flights not yet departed and grounding all airborne flights. Also, all bridges, tunnels, malls, schools, and government buildings across the United States were closed. A day after the 9/11 attacks, Al-Qaeda, a terrorist group formed during the 1980s, was directly linked to the attacks. The group's main goal was to create a united system of radical Islamists throughout the Muslim world. This group was led by Osama bin Laden, a Saudi fugitive who conducted terrorism from Afghanistan. Bin Laden, an established villain by the United States government, was thought to have planned an attack against the United States for its support of Israel. In 1996, Osama bin Laden issued a verdict stating that it was the duty of Muslims to kill Americans. Then, in 1998, bin Laden issued a second verdict declaring that all citizens paying taxes were also targets of Muslim attacks. Later, in 2001, Osama bin Laden publicized a video calling for a jihad or holy war against the United States. Although idealized by bin Laden, the 9/11 attacks were planned and organized by terrorist Khalid Mohammed. Now that the government knew who their enemy was, they had to decide what immediate and long-term measures to take to ensure their country's safety. President Bush, determined to bring justice to this horrific crime, said, "Make no mistake, the United States will hunt down and punish those responsible for these cowardly acts." He then spoke to America, describing the true magnitude of the attacks. Soon after, Bush declared war on terror in an attempt to form a global coalition against terrorism and find the people responsible for the 9/11 attacks. Then, on October 7th, the United States carried out Operation Enduring Freedom, firing airstrikes on Kabul, Afghanistan. Several days later, the United States government issued the Bush Doctrine, a policy stating that all nations not in support of the United States or suspected of protecting terrorists would become a target by the American military. Bush made this clear to other countries, saying that every nation in every region now has a decision to make, Either you are with us or you are with the terrorists. As a result of this policy, the United States government created a list of states supporting terrorism, including Iraq, Iran, and North Korea, declaring war against Iraq a year later. The government also made changes including lending more power to the federal government, forming new legislations opposing terrorism, expanding law enforcement authority, and forming new intelligence agencies such as the Department of Homeland Security. Also, as part of the government's search for terrorists, the United States captured suspected terrorists and kept them at a naval base in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. Then, on October 26, 2001, Bush signed the USA Patriot Act, an anti-terrorism legislation allowing the federal government and the executive branch to access emails, wiretap, and share information in order to identify terrorists or supporters of terrorism. As a result of the 9/11 attacks, many Americans grew fearful of traveling by plane and became intolerant of Muslims. Also, there's increased security in today's buildings and airports to prevent further attacks, causing the United States government to create higher defense budgets, threatening America's economy. The Federal Open Market Committee once said of the economic impacts of 9/11, the terrorist attacks have significantly heightened uncertainty in an economy that was already weak. In spite of the pain, loss, fear, and devastation caused by the 9/11 attacks, America also gained superior security and developed as a whole. 13 years later, in honor of the tragic attacks and the lives lost on 9/11, a memorial has been created to allow the public to experience the true magnitude of the disaster. The memorial, located at Ground Zero, commemorates the tragic deaths of 9/11 by displaying their names around a fountain and displaying paraphernalia found at the site of the attacks. September 11, 2001 is a day that will forever be ingrained in the memories of Americans and people all around the world.